Welcome back to Funk Puzzles. Today we're going to do a Kubok 16 tutorial. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about the basics of the game, but I'm also going to go into how to solve a Kubok 16. And I do believe that the methodology I'll give you will be able to take you all the way through up to even an expert, though there are some small things that can be applied at higher levels. Today I picked a hard Kubok. I actually haven't done this one, so I'm a little worried because I'm hoping it's not too hard. I did that so that I could show you a few of the techniques used, but let's go ahead and let's get started. First, what is Kubok 16? Well, it's a logic game, but it's not just a logic game. It also has a lot of math in it. And so it's kind of like Sudoku in that you have this grid and you're putting numbers in it. But unlike Sudoku, which is basically a pure logic game of almost like a process of elimination and if and or that, this game you have to do a lot of arithmetic in fact, an expert level you have to do an incredible amount of arithmetic, and you can even sometimes set up equations, but besides that, there is a lot of just logic to it, just kind of going through eliminating, looking for constraints and things like that. And so that's kind of what Kubok 16 is. And the basic rules go as follow. You have a 4x4 grid, which we can see here. And, we have 4 columns and 4 rows. And if you take that, 4 times 4, that equals to, I'll put that down here, equals 16. And what we have then for numbers is we have the numbers 1 through 16. So every individual grid cell gets a unique number from 1 to 16. And then what you do with those numbers is that each row and column has to add up to the corresponding number either above it or to the left of it. So for instance, this row in particular right here, or this column, let's say this column 3 has to add up to 20. So this cell, this cell, this cell, this cell have to add up to 20. But at the same time, this row number 2, this cell, and this cell, which was used in column 3, and this cell have to add up to 27. So you have to place all of the numbers from 1 to 16 so that all the cells add up correspondingly to the numbers to the left or above them. Right? So every row and column has to add up to the corresponding number above or to the left of it. So that is the basic rule set of Kubok 16. It's very simple, but actually solving it can be sometimes difficult and sometimes rather easy. Oops. I tried a tutorial earlier and I made a mistake. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the methodology that I use to solve a Kubok 16. And the first thing that I do is very simple, as I update the totals. Okay, so the number one thing I do is I update totals. Oh, and before I go into this, I do want to mention real quick. When it comes to difficulty of Kubok, you are always given some cells. Okay, you can't be given a blank Kubok on a standard one. And you're always given some cells. And typically, let's say like 90% of Kuboks, the more cells you get, the easier it's going to be. Okay, because obviously then you can do more arithmetic. And sometimes you have stuff like they'll give you this cell and then you can just straight up add it over. But not always. I do want to point that out, that sometimes you can have a Kubok that has less cells and it's easier than one that has more, because the constraints created by the cells as well as the positioning of the cells is very important. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at how I would start this. The first thing I like to do is I like to update the totals. Okay, and so this is so that I'm not always doing the same math over and over up to 39, because I'm given this 12 and this 5 down here, right? So 12 and 5 is 17, and from 39 that is 22. And so this 28 I can minus the 10 in the column below, and that is this 38 I minus the 10 is 28. And now this 20 I minus the 7, and that ends up being 3 or 13. Saying things a lot really wrong here. And then 13 plus 9 is 22, and 22 from 39 is 17, right? So those are my new totals, okay? And so now when I work the rows, 10 plus 13 is 24. 24 from 37 is, 10 plus 13 is 23. 23 from 37 is 14. 9 from 27. Boy, I'm saying things wrong. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right because this is a tutorial and I feel like maybe I'm rushing. 37 minus 10 is 27. Minus 13 is 14. Okay, let's just do it like that. 27 minus 9 is 18. 29 minus 12 is 17. Okay, and 43 minus 5 is 38. Minus 7 is 31. And so now I have my updated totals. Okay, and so the second thing that I like to do once I do that, this is the first thing. So the next thing I would like to do is I look for constraints. And when I do this, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about constraints like what are some limits on the following, on numbers? What are limits on numbers? What are limits on rows and columns? What are limits on individual cells, right? And the first one I always start with is numbers. And when I do, I look at I either start with a 1 or a 16. And typically I'll start with 16, okay? And so let's take an example of that. What I'm doing now is 16 is the biggest number we got, okay? So it's the most extreme number we got. So I say to myself, well, where can 16 not go on this grid, okay? Well, first of all, we know it can't go in column 3, right? Because column 3 only adds up to 13, right? So there is no 16 in there, okay? And we know that it can't go in row 1 because row 1 adds up to 14, right? So we know that there's no 16 here and there's no 16 here. And we can also tell those rows are really constrained in another way, but we'll get back to that in a second. I just want to follow through on 16. Now look at column of row 2. Now if I put a 16 here, you might say that's less than 18, but what's the other minimum I can have? Well, it's 1, right? And I still actually have this open cell here. And if I use the 1, you could say, well, you have 1 and 1, but you can't in Kubok. I must have a 2 over here, okay? Because I've used the 1, I can only use it once. So that's 19, and that's bigger than 18. So now it turns out that 16 cannot go here. Okay, and 16 obviously by the same logic can't go into a 17 row because it needs to be with 1 and 2 there, so it doesn't fit. So right off the bat, I know that 16 goes either here or here. But I also, by doing this now, I got a feel for the puzzle, which is another reason you do this, and I can tell that there's a lot of constraints on this puzzle. So now I'm going to look at number 2, which is the row and column constraints. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. So we're going to do this one next. And first thing I'm going to look at is this one, row 3 over here, right? Or column 3, and that is a 13. Well, what are the smallest digits I can have in there? 1 and 2, right? Oops, you can't really see that. Smallest digits I can have are 1 and 2, okay? So that means that the biggest digit I can have in here is 10. But I can't have a 10 because the 10's right there to the left of it. And I can't have a 9 because the 9's right there. So it turns out that the largest number I can have in this row is 8, right? Because I can't have 11, because if I have 11 here, 11 plus 1 plus 2 is 14, and I can only have 13 here, okay? So I know, because the 10's used and the 9's used, that this row, no matter what, is less than or equal to 8. The 8 is available, so I could put an 8 in here, and then I just have to get 13, so I could say like 1 and 4. So that is doable, okay? So I know that row is less than 8. Okay, now this 14 is another one that's really constrained, right? And so not as constrained as the previous one, but I have to at least have 1, right? So that means that this could be a 13, but again, 13's here and 12's here. So that means that can only be the 11th. That's the largest it can be. So that is less than or equal to 11. Wait. We'll put it over here. Less than or equal to 11. Okay, so we got some constraints there. What is next? What's another constraint that we have? Well, I like to look for high constraints, right? So I did the low ones. I feel that's pretty good. You might say, well, you have the 17 here. You can eliminate the 15 from there. And that's true. But I like to do big things at first. So I'm going to go back to step 1. And I'm going to look at, sometimes I never do step 3. I'm going to go back to step 1. And now I'm going to take the 1. So I'm going to examine from the low angle, right? So where can 1 not go? Well, right here, 1 could go here and row 1 because I would have, well, actually it can't. And this is an interesting one. This isn't because it's not big enough. But if I put a 1 in here, it can't be here because that would have to be a 13. Okay. And that's not exactly what I'm looking for, because when I first do this the first time for constraints, I'm really looking for a general one. This is actually related more to step 3 where I'm looking at individual cell, like it cannot be in this cell or this cell. Well, I guess you could say it's that row, but because it's a different kind of rule. But anyways, it doesn't matter. It just happens to fit in there. So what about the second row? Well, you could have a 1 here, and then you could put a 2 and a 15. So that works perfectly, right? So it's fine here. The 17, right? Same type of thing. We could probably manage that in there. But look at row 4. Row 4 is big. And so if I put a 1 in here, I need a 30 over here. And so this is extreme. And if we think about this, I have 2 cells, right? Right. And so what are the numbers that can fit in those 2 cells? The only 2 numbers, right? What if about, and I know a 16's in there. Well, obviously then it's 16 and 15, okay? So now we have our first really good clue, right? And we could have got that earlier, but I wanted to save it when I brought it back to the minimum, just so you would see if it wasn't as easy, like maybe you can narrow it down the range to 16, 15, 14, etc., etc. But this is a really nice one because it's 16, 15. And I'm going to put this like this. And so the way I always do is I always put corresponding cells. So like the 16 in the bottom left, I'm going to put the 15 in the bottom left because I know this is 16, 15 or it's 15, 16. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my 1 now. And we're going to work it down. And with the column 1, I notice 1 can't be in there, right? Because if I have a 1, it has to be 21. So we know 1's not here. We know 1's not there. Okay. Column 2 is 28, but now I have multiple numbers. In fact, I have a 16 or 15. So I have 12 or 13 left. So with the 1, I could have 10 or 11, whatever one I want. If I was to put it in there, I don't know that goes in there. I'm just looking for constraints. Going down 13 with 1, multiple ways to do it. And then the 17 with 1, well, column 4, that is interesting. It only appears that 1 could appear here with 16. Okay, so that is a very interesting thing. Right? Now, I really don't have too many constraints with the small ones, okay? Other than that, the 1 can't go here just because of the odd math. And where else couldn't it go? I forgot. I took it out somewhere and I forgot. It doesn't matter. And the 1 couldn't go somewhere else. But I don't think it matters too much because it wasn't too big of a deal. Okay, so now when we're at this stage, actually, we will go back and look. I'm sorry, I should have just kept it there. The 1 can't go here. Was it the 1 can't go here? No. 1, this would be easy. Oh, the 1 can't go down here. We know that. 1, 27, that's easy. 1 there. Yeah, so I think that's actually the only one. So 1 can't go in one spot. Oh, wait, no. 1 can't go here. So, yeah, that's not really too much. So 1 can't go here, so the 1's in all these other cells. But that's not really telling us too much. And those cells aren't constrained too much other than that these 2 right here, right? I can't have a 16 or 15 in them. What's the next biggest one? A 14, right? So this must be, if I had 14 in there, it'd have to be the lowest it can be is 8, okay? So this here, because 14 is the highest, this column has to be greater than or equal to an 8, okay? So now you're going to start to see how this all starts to come together, okay? How Kubok 16 comes together. So we have these constraints, right, that are really unique. And the first one I want to show you is right here in this 22 cell, because I wanted to get to this right away. When I put, what are my combinations? So, let me update. So now we're done with step 1 and 2, and sometimes we go back to that as we create new stuff. But now we're on step 3, and this is what I call grind. And so when you grind, you're just looking for things that work, okay? And so I'm going to give myself a little work area over here. And so when you grind, you just try things, Okay. In Kubok 16, you can't logic it out perfectly like Sudoku. You know, some people, when you see the Sudoku competitions, a lot of people use guessing as part of their strategy. But in here, you just have to try things, right? It's impossible. You cannot logic everything down. So that's where you're going to be doing a lot of little bits of arithmetic here and there. So let's go ahead and let's try our first thing. I like this column. Now in column 1, I have 22, okay? How can I get 22? And the way I like to do it is I like to branch it. And I know that the minimum it can be is 8 and the maximum it can be is 14. So I'm going to start with this. I'm going to say 11, 11, which I know isn't valid. I'm going to say 12, 10. Both 12 and 10 are used. I'm going to say 13, 9. Both 13 and 9 are used. I'm going to say 14 and 8. Those are available. And of course, 15, 16 can't be used. So right off the bat, I know another thing now, that this one is 14 and 8. Okay, so I can go 14, 14, 8, and 8, and 14. Okay, so look at that. We have 16 15s, we have 14 8s, right? So that's a nice little step for us, right? As we grind. So we're just looking at grinding. Basically, when you do grind, it's just like, I just want to say, all you do when you grind is kind of like you pick spots and try. And how do you pick spots? You just look at things that you know are constrained, okay? So now, let me get caught up here. Now, what else is constrained? Well, I'll tell you what else is constrained. This cell right here, okay? So you could say this is 2 number 3. So this actually isn't part of grinding. It sort of is. Kind of, this is 2, 3, and 3 kind of actually intermingled. But what can this be? Well, if it's 15, it can be 2, okay? And if it's 16, it can be 1. So what, this can only be 15 or 16. 15 is 2. If it's 16, it's 1, okay? So now I know another cell. This is either 2 or 1. Okay, well, where else can I do that? Well, I can look for this cell for a constraint, okay? If this is 14, right? Oh, wait, this 14 can't go here. Oh, no. What? 10, 24, 10, 23, sorry. 10, 13, 23, 14. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so actually we got our first number. I'm kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting to get it that early. I didn't look at this right away. This cell, right, has only got a 14 total, so it can't be 14. Okay, so that cell cannot be 14. Oops, this is 2, 1. So it can only be 8. And if it's 8, then by the logic of our other one, this is 14. If you're wondering why I was so surprised, I wasn't expecting it, because it is a hard. I was expecting sometimes it takes a little bit more to get the first one. But we got it really easy. And now, based on what we have, you're going to see that things are going to kind of fall into place, right? Because 8 plus 10 is what? And this first row here, right? If we look at this now, we got everything to it. 8 plus 10 is 18, plus 13 is 31, and we just got to get 37. Or you could say 8 from 14, right? Either way, 6, okay? Now we have this middle portion, okay? So we got 2 numbers, 2 really nice numbers really quick. And I'm just going to update my totals. So we have this one, that's done. And this gets updated to a, this is 23 from 27, so this is only a 4. So obviously this is very constrained, okay? 2 cells for 4, well, what can that be, right? That can only be one thing. It can only be a 3, 1, and a 1, 3. But now we have a problem because we were using the 1 as an option down here, so we can't use the 1. And so I think this puzzle is going to fall apart pretty quick. We can't use the 1, so now this puzzle, we know it is a 2, right? And if it's a 2, then we know down below we have 15 or 16. But obviously, it can't be a 16, so it must be a 15 because of the constraint of 17 on top, or the total, right? And if that's a 15, this is a 16, okay? So now I'm just going to do a little cleanup. I always like cleaning up as we do Kubok, okay? And we actually know this one, so we can get rid of that too, okay? And so now we're almost to the very end, right? This has actually been a really nice puzzle. It's been pretty fun. And if we want, we can just do a little grind here, or sometimes I call it plug and play. So I'll put that over here, plug and play. And so what do I mean by that? Well, we have 3 here. What would this be? I need 28, 3, 16 is 19. So I'd have to have 19, and then I'd have to have 9, but I can't do that. So obviously that's not 3. This is 1, 17, so that's 11, and this is 3, 6, 9, and 4. Okay, and look at that. Just like that, we solved a hard Kubok, right? And a very fun little thing here. Very nice. I really enjoy this. So let me just go ahead and finish up here. So we got this. One thing I always like to do is just make sure that everything is correct. And what we have here is 8 plus 10 plus 6 plus 13. That's 18, 24, 37. 14, 1, 15, 3, 18, 9, 27. 12 plus 11 is 23 plus 4 is 29. 12 plus 11 is 23 plus 4 is 27 plus 2 is 29. 5 is 16 is 21 plus 7 is 28 plus 15 is 43. 8 plus 14 is 22. 22 plus 12 is 34 plus 5 is 39. 10 plus 1 plus 11 plus 16, that's 11. 22, 38. 6, 3, and 4 is 13 plus 7 is 20. And 29, or 39 would be the 13, 9, 22, 24, and 39. So there you go. 4 things that we had was, just in case you're wondering again, I should have kept them up there, but I was just going ahead, always cleaning things up. And so 1 was update totals. Okay, update totals. 2, find constraints. Or actually, it was only 3 things. 3, grind, or plug and play, whatever you want to call it. Plug and play. And with that, you should be able to solve all the way up to expert. Sometimes with expert, you do need to make equations. Maybe I'll do one for that later. Thank you very much, and have